One defiant area is California, where you got a governor who's basically trying to undermine the federal government already. Now, I said if I were President Trump and there was a mayor or governor or even a county commissioner that refused a waiver to detain a criminal undocumented person, somebody who's been arrested for a crime, and they didn't detain them, I would arrest that governor, that mayor. I would send the attorney general, which would be Pam Bondi, to that jurisdiction with FBI agents and put that person in handcuffs with the media photographing it. That's what I would do if I were President Trump, because that's the message that these people need to get.
All right, guys, we have made it through the weekend. Big weekend ahead. It's the Army-Navy game. I'm headed there. President Trump's headed there. I think everyone in Trump world is headed there. Hopefully Navy can pull this thing out. Yesterday, Tom Homan met with New York Mayor Eric Adams. I'm going to talk to Bill O'Reilly about that in just a second. And then we've got some exclusive polling about the state of the electorate. And it's not coming out till Monday. You guys are getting the first bite at this. So this is pretty cool. A lot to break down on the electorate, on Donald Trump's approval, and also exclusively who was the most effective surrogate on either side. We're going to get all to that. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you about the folks at LifeVac. If you have a fire extinguisher or first aid kit, you need a LifeVac, right? LifeVac is something that will help you save a life in the event of a choking incident. It's used by police, first responders. Lots of restaurants have them. Cruise lines have them. I mean, they're all over the thing. And I have mine right near my fire extinguisher. I hope I never have to use it. But if I do, I will be happy when I do that because it's so simple. I know that a lot of people get trained in the Heimlich maneuver. This is much simpler. You put it on person's face. It sucks out whatever is obstructing in the airway. And I'm telling you, and also if your kid's school doesn't have one of these, the folks at LifeVac will send you one for free for that school. And then, by the way, God forbid you ever have to use it, they will then replace that for free. Don't wait another minute. Your life, someone's life could depend on having a LifeVac in your house. Go to lifevac.net. It's lifevac.net, lifevac.net. Get that, save a life. Great Christmas gift, by the way. All right. Biden commuted a bunch of prison sentences for folks. We saw this. It's coming out. I mean, it's unbelievable, the names and the amount of people and some of the records that are happening. You thought Hunter was bad. This is insane. It is unbelievable what's going on. Elizabeth Warren making incendiary comments about the killer of that United Healthcare CEO. It's no accountability, right? It's unbelievable. All right, a couple things. I'm going to talk to Bill O'Reilly in just a second about Mayor Adams in New York meeting with Tom Homan, the border czar, and how that went down. Remember, we talked to Tom beginning of the week, and here we are now. We're going to talk to Bill O'Reilly about that. Plus, Bill has a brand new book out, and he's going to give us some historical perspective on what Trump needs to do if he wants to be in that, according to him, that top tier of presidents in history. By the way, this polling that we're going to bring to you at the end of the show, it is exclusive. You will see it nowhere else. It's not public till Monday. So when I say exclusive, like this is, they've asked the folks from Signal to come on our show to share it with you. And there's a question on here about who the most effective surrogate was for either party. I'll be interested if you can guess it. Okay. But I want to tell you about something that I've got going on right now in my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. Sign up for it. It is free, although you can be a VIP member to see some exclusive content and photos and things like that. If you're interested in going to the inauguration, I've got links in the newsletter, SeanSpicer.com, about how to get tickets for the balls and everything like that. I'm putting it all in the newsletter because I'm getting a lot of emails. So this is the one-stop place for this. So go check it out, SeanSpicer.com. If you have someone that's interested in going to a ball or attending a parade or whatever, attending the inauguration. I'm just the messenger, by the way. I can't get you tickets. I'm going to tell you how you can get them. That's up to you then. So sign up for the newsletter, and plus you get a lot of other cool information. If you want to be a VIP sponsor, you're more than welcome to. It's awesome. It's cheap. It's totally helpful to me. So consider that, but it is free just to get all that information. By the way, we had Seb on the show earlier this week. He's down tremendously weight-wise. He looks fantastic. I asked him this months ago, how are you and your wife Katie doing it? He said, my PhD weight loss. And the cool thing is it's not a fad. It's not like starve yourself of this and then you get this. They sit down with you, craft a plan. and change your lifestyle. Here's what you can eat, when you should eat, how you avoid things during the holidays. I've dropped some weight. I've been able to maintain it because the folks at PhD Weight Loss meet with you weekly. There's accountability. They are nutritionists by training, so they can talk to you about how different foods affect you. Trust me, it's the last diet you're going to need because it's not fad. It's not trying to lose. It's going to be a process, but you learn how to lose it and then how to maintain it. They send you some food at no extra cost as part of the program. It's amazing. You get these weekly weigh-ins. So call 1-864-644-1900. Better yet, go to myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in the man himself, Mr. Bill O'Reilly. He is the host of the No Spin News. He's on the First Television Network right after us, if you're watching us on cable. A legendary host and anchor, but he's also got a brand new best-selling book called Confronting the Presidents. And I think it's especially important to understand the context of President Trump in that. So let's take in a nice conversation with Mr. Bill O'Reilly. Bill, always great to see you. Thanks for making time for us.
I had no choice, Sean. You called, you demanded, I gave in, and here I am.
If that were only a partly true, I would think it would be amazing, but that's not true. The Venmo payment has gone through, though. I can attest to that. So Mayor Adams meets with Tom Homan, the new border czar, yesterday. And I got to say, half of me is excited that somebody who declared proudly a sanctuary city just a couple years ago is now coming over to the side. And I should be just accepting that and saying, great, if we can move more people. But part of me wants to say, really? You're the one who touted this and was so proud to call yourself a sanctuary city mayor and talk about open borders and decry us as racists and et cetera. And now you want to talk about keeping New Yorkers safe.
Adam is trying to save his butt. He's in big trouble with the law and in public opinion polls. He knows that most New Yorkers don't want this unfettered, undocumented migrant surge, costing a fortune. The state doesn't have any money anyway. So that's why he's doing what he's doing.
So it's political.
Yeah, I don't think he's a bad man. I know him a little bit, but it's not going to come to anything. New York is run by unbelievably corrupt progressives on the city council in Albany. So Adams could say whatever he wants to say. He can meet with Homan for 3 weeks. They can go to Club Med together. Not going to matter. The structure in this state has to be torn up before anything concrete is going to happen on the migrant front.
So is Adams a one-off because of his political situation? Or do you think other Democrats join in and say, all right, I might have declared myself a sanctuary city before, but I'm on the wrong side of this issue and I need to get right with it?
Yeah, I don't think the right and wrong are anything that these people even consider. It's all about them getting power. And if they think that their liberal base wants a sympathetic posture toward undocumented immigration, that's what they're going to do. It's cynical. I know my analysis is, but I've lived in New York. I was born here, raised here. I know what the game is in the Democratic machine. Across the country, I think the last election that we had a month ago proves that Americans are coming back to some semblance of sanity about how their country should be run. And these progressive politicians are feeling that heat. So that's why Adams and others are starting to moderate a little bit. One defiant area is California, where you got a governor who's basically trying to undermine the federal government already. Now, I said, if I were President Trump and there was a mayor or governor or even a county commissioner that refused a waiver to detain a criminal undocumented person, somebody who's been arrested for a crime, and they didn't detain him, I would arrest that governor, that mayor. I would send the attorney general, which would be Pam Bondi, to that jurisdiction with FBI agents and put that person in handcuffs with the media photographing it. That's what I would do if I were President Trump. Because that's the message that these people need to get.
All right. If it's Friday, Bill O'Reilly has a bestseller out. I mean, I'm half kidding, but every time I turn around, you got another book on the best-selling list. You did it again. Confronting the Presidents. And I was thinking about your book in the context of our conversation, because you really always have this unbelievable look at history and you in perspective. And so this week I'm watching Donald Trump open the New York Stock Exchange, named Times Person of the Year. And I started to think about the conversation that I was going to have with you in the context of your latest bestseller. Do you think that he thinks, you've known the guy a long time? Let me just make sure everyone understands that. So I ask you this because unlike a lot of the other people that you write about and you research and then write a bestseller about, you actually really know Donald Trump. And so I ask the following. Do you think that a guy like Donald Trump takes office thinking about his legacy?
He called me after he saw the News Nation documentary on confronting the presidents. And I never call the president because that's intrusive and it's not my job. I'm a journalist / historian. And we are now the biggest selling nonfiction authors in the world, Sean. 19 #1 New York Times bestsellers. And I'm sure they celebrate that over there when that number pops up. But the president, Trump, called me and said, I just saw the documentary. It was very interesting. And I said, I sent you the book months ago. Did you read it? He read the portion about him, which I think is very fair, by the way.
I love it.
But he didn't go over the others. You know, as you know, the president's not a big book reader. But it's interesting you're asking this question because it's right in sync with him. So he goes, well, what do I have to do to get in the upper echelons? And I said, well, the first thing you do is you should buy a mountain right next to Mount Rushmore and then just start the carving because they can't stop you. You can put your face right up there. Can't be on their mountain because there's no space, but get another mountain. But then I got serious and I said, listen, you did something that nobody else has ever done with the exception of Grover Cleveland. And believe me, his second term was the biggest disaster that could ever be. So you should read that chapter in the book so you don't fall into the traps that Grover Cleveland fell into. But I said, it's all about fulfilling a mandate to improve the nation. And you have a vision because the vision's been given to you by the people. But that your supporters gave you the vision. You don't need to go out of that vision unless obviously something happens that he has to react to. But if you can get the border under control, bring down consumer prices a bit, if you can stabilize overseas problems and push ahead like you did in your first term with real wages rising for workers, you'll be considered in the Reagan area. You'll be right up next to Ronnie because I'll make sure you are. You know, the press, the corrupt media will never write the good things that Trump did in his first term. But he had a successful first term, and that's why he was reelected, because people were comparing Trump's first term to Biden's first term. There's no comparison. No comparison.
If you had to put a number
right now.
That's
why he won. That's why Trump won.
I totally agree with that. I think that people were concerned about personality traits the first time. And then they said, wait a second, look at what Biden's done. He may not tweet. He doesn't stay up late, but these policies suck and our lives are worse. I'll take some mean tweets if I can have the good policies back and a safer and more prosperous country. If you had to rank...
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, based on all of your research that you do on all these books, if it was just the first term, because I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. If it was just the first term, where would you put him among the 46 presidents we've had?
In the upper echelon, in the positive area. Very hard for a one-term president, by the way.
Right, fair enough. But that's why I want to ask you the follow-up. So where if let's just say he has that successful second term. Right. You mentioned Reagan. Give me a number. Is that top 5? Is that top 10?
Top 10.
Top 10.
Top 10. He's not going to get the top 5. I mean, those presidents that are in the 5, Lincoln, Washington, FDR, Teddy Roosevelt, James K. Polk. I mean, people are shocked. Who? Polk is the guy who extended the United States from sea to shining sea. He was brilliant in what he did. Nobody even knows about him. But Trump could get into the top 10. But the first time around, the Capitol riot hurt his historical legacy. So he's got to overcome that now. And it may not be fair, because I don't believe he incited the riot. He was never charged with it. No serious person investigating what happened that day would say that Donald Trump wanted that riot. He didn't. All right. But the corrupt press branded him as an insurrectionist. That hurt him. But he can overcome all that if he carries out his vision now. But it's easier said than done. That's for sure.
All right, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this conversation with Bill, but if you're having people over or you just love a good cup of coffee, this is what I served all of my family during the Thanksgiving break. Everyone came over. We were making pots of this over and over and over again. Wired to Fish. Wired, the number 2, coffeefish.com. It is amazing. The beans come from Mexico and Guatemala. If you're a coffee snob, you're going to be like, this is amazing, right? I'm not as much of a snob. I can tell how great this is. So it's wired, the numeral 2, fishcoffee.com. But the best part about it is that they give 25% of their proceeds to faith-based organizations and clean water initiatives. So it's like totally consistent with my values. And I'm not giving money to some woke company like Starbucks that I feel like is inconsistent with my values. I love the taste of it. I can actually make it sometimes and then keep it for iced coffee afterwards. But you are going to impress your guests. If you have people coming over, you just like a good cup of coffee, whatever it is, go to wired, the numeral 2, fishcoffee.com. Use code WECARE, one word, just we care, all together, no spaces, for 15%. That's wired, 2fishcoffee.com. Back to the conversation with Bill. So when I watched the Meet the Press interview last week and then read the Time magazine profile, in my time with Trump, I saw a different guy, somebody who is more thoughtful, more deliberative in his responses. Is that a one-off in your opinion, or do you think that he comes to this second term with the frame of mind that you just talked about, that he's thinking about how do I get into that top echelon of presidents?
It depends what day it is. See,
that's the right answer.
You probably know this better than anybody. If he's bored, he's going to stir it up. He's going to be a provocateur. And so to keep him busy. And if he's going to France, to the cathedral at Notre Dame, and he's the most important person by far in that celebration, then he's not going to be a provocateur. But if he's sitting around and somebody annoys him, and he's going to lash. And the best advice to Donald Trump is keep that down as much as you can and keep concentrating on a bigger picture of success. It doesn't matter what CNN says. You, Donald Trump, have destroyed CNN. You have destroyed NBC News. You have destroyed the Washington Post, because they're all not coming back. They're all done. So that you've got them. You don't have to dance on their grave. What you have to do is to make sure you have a clear vision on how the problems should be solved, not pie in the sky. And I'll give you an example. When he says, well, we're going to end the birthright legacy, you're not, because that would require a overturning of the 14th Amendment, which you're never going to get when Congress comprised of Democrats at this point. You need 2/3 of both houses to throw out an amendment. Last time it was done was 1933 prohibition. Never been done since then. So you're not going to be able to end that. So don't even get involved with that stuff. Do the things you can do and do them well.
So let's just go down the, you mentioned secure the border. I unequivocally think he'd have widespread support on that. What are those other 3, 4, 5 things that he should focus on the first term to have a successful presidency and legacy?
Okay, so he's going to get the border secure. That is a fait accompli. He'll cut down the migrant intrusion by 75%, because Mexico is going to have to cooperate or he'll break their economy. And Sheinbaum's got to know that. So they'll put the troops back on the northern and southern border. Mexico will. I think Trump should declare the cartels a terrorist group so we can take care of them, because Mexico never will. And we got to stop this fentanyl drug stuff. And that's the way to do it. We'll take care of them. All right. And we know where they live, and we got enough people and drones to take them off the planet. And that's what should happen, just like Soleimani in Iran. The second thing is, in a consumer way, what you want to do here is have enough free market competition that salaries go up, the best company wins, the best prices win, capitalism comes back. Get the government out of it. It never works when the government is in the free marketplace. Get him out. Trump, that's where he lives. He's in that zone. So I don't expect trouble there. Then he's got to go overseas. I think he's already got to deal with Putin for a ceasefire in Ukraine. I don't know. He won't tell me for sure, but I think that he does. All right. And then with the mullahs in Iran, who are behind all the terrorist atrocities, they're on the ropes. So Trump can go in and break them just like he can break Mexico quickly. So I think that there'll be some arrangement there to stop the nuclear stuff and to stop the terrorism. China's a wild card. And it was smart of Trump to invite Xi to the inauguration. Xi won't come, but Xi will send his foreign minister. And Trump's very good at deal making, as you know. That's his game. He knows how to make deals. And so I see him, the odds are that he will have a successful second term, unlike Grover Cleveland. And he will accomplish most of the things he wants to accomplish.
You know, you mentioned the birthright. The other big thing that he wants to do is tariffs. He thinks they're a negotiating tool. I think they've effectively been used. You saw how quick Justin Trudeau, Governor Trudeau,
sure,
hightailed it down to Mar-a-Lago when he did this. You mentioned the president of Mexico as well. If he goes through with the tariffs, is that ultimately going to be a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the American consumer?
A lot of people are, oh, well, we don't want to have tariffs. The country was at the richest point in its history in the 1890s. It was all tariffs.
It depends. So, number one, he's using it as a negotiation. So if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. So do it. Give us a favorable trade situation. We don't want this huge deficit. I think it's a mistake to call little Justin Trudeau. I can make fun of him. But he should, give Trudeau respect, because Trudeau obviously wants to please him. You don't want to, I don't know why you would want to diminish him. I don't have a lot of respect for Justin Trudeau, and I'm sure Trump doesn't either. But so what? If he's going to do what's good for America, then we prop him up a little bit. That's just me. I mean, I'm a disciplined guy when I'm evaluating this kind of stuff. But by and large, Donald Trump's going in with a very clear vision of what should happen. And if he can get 75% of that done, he then gets in the top 10 of the presidents.
So these corporate CEOs are now sucking up to Trump. The first term, he was bad. They walked away. They wouldn't appear on councils with him. They were very vocal that they would instill DEI policies in a response to some of his announcements, pronouncements, policies, whatever. And now they can't help meet with him quick enough and talk about how great he is. Mark Zuckerberg, who was the king of Zuckbucks in the 2020 election, suddenly wants to donate $1 million to his inauguration. Okay, I am a bitter Irishman. I'm petty, right? You piss me off. I make you sit in the timeout box and beg for forgiveness. I can't help that. He almost relishes these guys coming back to him.
Sure.
Is the tactic, hey, you were wrong, you're sucking up to me? I just think that they're being transactional, and maybe that's good enough. But I can't help but think, why did these guys get to jump the line to become his buddies now because they write a big check and say nice things? Shouldn't they sit in the timeout box for a little while?
What good does that do?
I know. Makes me feel better.
So I'm president, right? And I know Zuckerberg tried to undermine, and was successful to some extent, the 2020 election by pumping $300 million into a few swing state counties, which is what Zuckerberg did. And it's never been defined, never. So here's Zuckerberg going, goes to Mar-a-Lago. Oh, I want to be a friend now. So what do? Slap him around, humiliate him? What good does that do? I take his million. All right, so hey, Mark, thanks. And then after Inauguration Day, I bring the new head of the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, in, and I say, I want you to appoint your inspector general. Take a look at the 300 million that Zuckerberg pumped into 2020 and tell me where it went. Tell me what it did. And I want that on my desk in 8 months. And then if Zuckerberg did something untoward, you got his million already, and then you go, this is what he did.
All right, maybe that's a lot better than me. That's a lot. You're a historian, and you've written all these books, as I mentioned. But you also have vast experience and understanding of the media landscape, and you've seen a lot change during your career. As someone who's had this kind of experience, I mean, put your historian hat on for a moment and say, what would you, if Trump called you, aside from the big picture legacy stuff that he wanted your take on from the book, if he said, okay, Bill, I got this new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, I got a new opportunity to engage with the press. I used long form media and independent media successfully during the campaign. How should I approach the media this time? What should I do different, the same, et cetera, from the first time around?
Look, there's a couple of realities that President Trump has to accept. The media hates him. Always going to, not going to change. The culture of the media is ardent liberalism. Every corporation, with the exception of Fox, is that. So you got to accept it. You're not going to change it. Number two, you don't have to engage the media anymore. You won. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to cajole them. You don't have to do anything. You won. You beat them. So the press secretary and the communications office inside the White House, they have one job and one job only, to talk to the folks. Press directly to the folks. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. These are the accomplishments. These are the problems. Now, I hope a 27-year-old can do that. I'm not sure. It takes a very large frame of reference to do it. And then if you want to bring it up to the legacy level, the communications office at the White House has got to know their history. I diffused something very, very quickly on News Nation when they were screaming about Gates and RFK Jr. and all of this stuff, and press was appalled. You remember that, Sean? Yep. That was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
I mean, people were the panels and all. I looked into the camera and said, "What is this?" It's exactly what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did. Silence, because none of those pinheads in the media know anything about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They don't know anything. And then I explained the Roosevelt administration, by necessity, was ruled by about 5 guys. All Harvard guys, a couple of Columbia, but mostly Harvard guys, Harry Hopkins, all of these guys. And FDR basically had them in the White House, and all of the cabinet heads just got phone calls from his inner circle and said, you do this, you do that. They don't make policy. Now, under Bush the younger, they did. Condoleezza Rice. You had Cheney as vice president. You had Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. You had Colin Powell, Secretary of State. They had power. They were telling Bush, yeah, you're going to do this. Bush did a lot. That's not what Trump's going to run the White House. All of the policies are going to come from the Oval Office.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so the committee, the heads of the departments are going to expedite. That's what they're going to do. It's exactly what Roosevelt did. So when you present that to the corrupt media, it's because they don't know anything. That's how you have to handle it.
I think that point, and that's why I was so excited to hear the piece of advice you gave him, because understanding history, how things have worked, who has stumbled where they succeeded and how, that you bring a perspective that is so missing. Because I think, to your point, there are so many times when I talk about the contract with America, what Newt did, how this worked, and that's only modern history. And I'll get these head scratches. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well,
Yeah,
this
they
is
don't
where
know.
they don't know.
So that's how you handle a press if you're Trump. Again, you're trying to
You
convince him
think
of
he can,
anything.
though? I agree with you, just so we're clear. But I wonder, you've known him longer than anybody.
Do I
don't
think
know
he
that he can
It depends
resist.
it depends who he hires. He's got to have access to people who know what has happened in this country and why. He has to have access to them. Now, I don't know who they are. I mean, I don't vet them. All I do is I'm the only combination reporter historian in the national media in the country. Nobody else does what I do.
What do you think, based on everything that you've known, all the reporting, right? This is what your historical wheelhouse is, understanding these presidents. This is why you have all the bestsellers. Where do you rank the cabinet? I get they're not confirmed. If everyone was confirmed, where does this cabinet rank? You want to talk about history?
Do that because you don't know how they, what their potential is, what their discipline is. You just don't know. If I'm a senator, I look at people, can he or she do the job? So Hegseth, for example, can Hegseth run the largest corporation in the world, which is the Pentagon?
Right.
Does he have the experience to do it? Can he do it? So you got to give Hegseth a chance to come in and try to convince you that he can. But that's the bar. That's what the senators are going to be looking at. Now, there's a lot of politics involved. You and I are realistic people. We know that. But you've got to have some kind of level of sophistication and frame of reference to operate in any White House. But it's easier for these people to operate under Trump because they're not making policy. Trump is going to make the policy.
Yes. Yes. All right. Last question for you. I believe that this day one, I was there in 2016. I've watched several modern inauguration days. You give a speech, you go back to the White House, you get a tour, you get your badges, you go to a ball and dance. That's the routine. Last time he signed a ton of executive orders, and then we went to the ball and danced after the media lied about Martin Luther King being taken out of the bust of the Martin Luther King Day. By the way, just as a side note, Bill, if you ever make it to DC, the White House experience that they've just set up is phenomenal. But even those guys got it right that there was the bust of Martin Luther King in the fake Oval Office that the media couldn't get right. If his day one is anything like has been reported, how historically, context-wise, will this be in terms of other day ones? Because I don't think anyone's ever seen anything like it in history, but I don't have the depth and breadth of experience that you do.
Well, it's going to be hysteria because Trump will overturn what Biden's done in many, many different areas, and the press will go hysterical on it. As far as history is concerned, you did have presidents like Andrew Jackson. He's the best example, and it's Trump's favorite guy. And I keep telling Trump, don't get a Derringer because, Andrew would shoot you and you don't want to get involved with any firearms. But Andrew Jackson came in after John Quincy Adams and just wiped out everything. It was like, okay, I don't like Quincy Adams. They hated each other. Quincy and Jackson hated each other. So Jackson did it. Jackson came in, I'm wiping everything out. And there are a few other presidents who despised their predecessors so much that they just came in and that's what Biden did. That's what Biden did. And it led to catastrophe. Trump will be flamboyant. I believe he will do a lot of executive orders quickly, and the press will, of course, respond. But he's got to have Caroline, what is it, Levitt? Is that our last name? She's got to really be up and explain to why are we doing this? What is this going? Why is it going to benefit the American people? She's got to be very, very methodical in her presentation. And that's a heavy burden on a 27-year-old. I remember when I was 27, I was lucky I wasn't in the penitentiary. I mean, it's ridiculous. But she
I think
looks
when I was
like a very,
37,
very, yeah, she looks very smart and everything. But there'll be a lot of pressure on her.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know that I would feel any different when I was 37. Luckily, I was in my
Yeah.
40s when I took that job. Bill O'Reilly, another best-selling book to your resume. I think, what is it? Just out of curiosity, what is this now? Best-selling number?
19 #1 New York Times bestsellers. And you know how happy that makes them, Sean, over there. Put my
They're
name at
just
the
so
top of the
excited.
list.
When they have
Right.
to put Bill O'Reilly #1, there's somebody that says, no, it's your turn. You do it. I did it last time. Anyway, congratulations. I know we're going to get number 20 in like 2 months now, though. Thank you for joining us. Always appreciate your time and your insight.
Merry Christmas, Sean.
You too. Merry Christmas. All right, guys. Great conversation with Bill. Now I want to bring in Brent Buchanan from Signal Polling. They were phenomenal during the year. They've got exclusive polling to share with us. Let's go. Brent, thanks for joining us. I can't thank you guys enough for these exclusive insights into your latest poll. I'm excited to get into it. What has changed since the election?
Donald Trump is helping Republicans. And he had some coattails in the presidential election. I mean, you see that in now Senator-elect McCormick in Pennsylvania. But what's really interesting is the generic ballot nationally of the people who are going to vote in the next election. And that's what we've got to keep in mind, is that the people who vote in 26 aren't exactly the people who voted in 24. And even though it's a little bit less Republican in their recall of who they supported for the congressional race in last month, it's actually +3 for Republicans now. And what's driving that is men and minority voters, which are the exact same two voter segments that propelled Donald Trump to victory across 7 swing states.
So if you're advising a candidate now, do you double down on men and minorities, or is that a signal to go reach out to other groups that aren't part of that core constituency?
You go after them because you got to build these relationships. And I think that's one lesson that I really took away from this election is, even though Donald Trump did really well with minority voters, down ballot Republicans didn't do as well with them. And he is an incredibly well-known brand. There's not a single person on the face of this earth who does not know who Donald Trump is or have an opinion about him. And that doesn't apply to every other Republican, even those running for governor and Senate, Congress in this next election. And they've got to get out there and build their own recognition and make sure those people turn out. You know, what the diploma divide has really shifted in this country in the last 30 years, where college-educated voters 30 years ago were Republicans, and now college-educated voters are Democrats. And those are the people you don't have to get to turn out. They show up at every single election. It takes no effort to get them to cast a ballot. And so now Republicans are the party of working class folks, people who have normal jobs, normal lives. They're working to make ends meet, and they forget about voting. Like, it's just not, they're not consumed with politics and news like a lot of the people on the left that used to be our voters 30 years ago were.
You asked a question on the survey: when deciding who to vote for in the 2024 presidential election, which was most important to you, cultural and social issues or economic issues? I find this interesting. 20% who voted said cultural issues, and 35% said economic issues, and then 39% said that they were about equal. You think does that jive with what you had seen going into the election?
Well, I think it shows that the economy was definitely a significant driver. And that was one thing that the Trump campaign was really good at doing. I mean, if you remember the ad that they produced of Trump is for they, or Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump
They,
is
them.
for you. When he was talking about the Trump is for you, he was showing economically why he was for you, even though he was using a cultural issue to drive a wedge. And to me, that's like the lost narrative of this presidential election, that it wasn't just economics and it wasn't just culture. It was actually both, because many Americans, especially minority Americans, because that's who elected Donald Trump. White voters voted at the exact same rates for Harris and Trump as they did for Biden and Trump in 2020. And it was the non-white voters that made up the margins for Trump in all these states. And as you look at those voters, they're much more culturally conservative than white progressive Democrats are. And so I think that helped peel them off of Democrats. And then it was the economic issue that sealed the deal, where they said, okay, well, Democrats definitely don't understand me. I don't know if I'm ready to go Republican. And then they look at their pocketbook and they go, okay, yeah, I'm ready to go Republican.
It's funny because you asked, which of the following issues do you believe should be Donald Trump's top priority to address in 2025? Number one, stop inflation, basically 40%. Number two, illegal immigration, 22. And then cutting down on waste, fraud, and abuse is 14%. Nothing else hits double digits. It's funny because that's literally, you tell a candidate when you're trying to advise them, stay on message. It sounds like those are the three issues that he all talked about. I mean, he was literally on message.
Yeah, completely. And you want to know something that'll blow your mind? Democrats are more likely to have answered he needs to address inflation than Republicans. So 49% of Democrats said stop inflation and the rising cost of living, and only 30% of Republicans said that, because Republicans, actually a plurality, 39% of them said stop illegal immigration. So it's so interesting.
So for Republicans, it was immigration, and for Democrats, it was inflation. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what
and
they want.
yet their candidate didn't talk about it.
Well, she did, and then she quit talking about it and decided to call him Adolf Hitler instead. And you can actually see her start to drop in the polls from the second she made that her closing message.
Speaking of dropping in the polls, I loved, I was looking through the issues that you asked people what they care about. And when you asked people about different issues in October, the end of October, abortion was at 9%. It's now down to 3.7, right? I thought that was fascinating. Threats to democracy, 14%. That's down to 11.8. It's like these issues that Democrats wanted to make, as soon as they stopped screaming about them, no one cared.
Yeah, completely. And I think you could say the same about Kamala Harris's image, because if you go look at once we put these on our website on Monday, because you're the first one getting them, you'll see that her favorable image, the strong favorability of her image, just tapered off once they quit spending money about her. It just showed how thin she was as a candidate. And Donald Trump has actually ticked up in strong favorability for him in this exact same time. And even though the alternate media, so not the mainstream media, really drove a lot of the messaging to these non-traditional Republican voters, mainly minority voters, the mainstream media still has a lot of power to be able to move numbers quickly. But I think what we saw is they could only move it so far. And when they quit talking about a person or an issue, that drops in salience.
All right, speaking of people, you guys asked something really cool. You asked both sides, both parties, to tell us who was the most, it says, of the following surrogates, which was the most effective in generating support. And then you listed a bunch of Trump surrogates. You asked the same question for Democrats. Tell me, who was the top person for Republicans?
Top person, period, Elon Musk. 47%. And it was even more Democrats, 46% of them said it's Elon Musk. And then when you look at asking the same question about Harris surrogates for Democrats, 55% said they weren't sure. But
so does that tell you that she didn't? I mean, the top Harris surrogate, according to your data, 27% Taylor Swift. The next person is Oprah at basically 16%, and then no one else in double digits.
Yep.
Does that mean that they didn't have an effective surrogate?
I think it's that they live in an echo chamber. I mean, they're the main problem Democrats have now is they're the party of the coastal elites, and the coastal elites thought that all these artists being condescending to voters was a great idea, and we should put lots of money and effort behind that. And that's why her campaign spent millions of dollars paying people to show up at events and either sing a song or endorse her, and it had no effect. When you had 55% of voters say that essentially none of these surrogates were effective for Harris, like, that's pretty damning.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting, as I said, so let's just, when you ask the question of Democrats, Taylor Swift number one, and then Oprah number two at 15.8%, and then no one else in double digits. When you asked of the Republican surrogates who was most effective, as we noted, Elon Musk, 47%, and then there's basically a two-way tie. Robert F. Kennedy, 21.6, Joe Rogan, 21.9. They're almost there as meaning they're almost as effective as the number one person on the Dem side.
Yeah, and here's what's really interesting. RFK Jr. was more effective with female voters, that they believed he was more effective with females, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, like, I'm 40 years old, and a lot of people in my age bracket right now are very much waking up to the message that he has been sharing even before he came and endorsed Donald Trump. And that really speaks to moms who want to protect their kids and their kids' kids. And then the more effective for men, especially younger men, was Joe Rogan. And younger men shifted significantly towards Donald Trump. I mean, when they're going to write books about this.
Was it bipartisan though? Like, was it, or is it just within those parties?
Well, so it's bipartisan, and it's kind of hard to break out because I think there are Democrats who think Joe Rogan was effective, and that could have suppressed turnout among Democrats. I mean, the Trump campaign did such a good job going after these new audiences and groups of people and building relationships and just basically ignoring the mainstream media and reaching exactly who they needed to reach through these surrogate relationships.
It's fascinating. I thought this was, I'm so glad you asked this question. To me, it's fascinating because we have spent a ton of time talking about surrogates. You actually have the data now to back up who was effective and who wasn't. And just to give people a sampling, your list was Elon Musk, Hulk Hogan, Robert F. Kennedy, Jason Aldean, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, Kid Rock, Brett Favre, Dennis Quaid. And then on the Dem side, Oprah, Taylor, LeBron, Springsteen, Beyonce, De Niro, Tyler Perry, Cardi B, Usher. I mean, you covered the gamut. So we have an answer on that. Brent, I got to thank you guys at Signal for giving us the opportunity to share this with our audience exclusively. And I look forward to the Monday public release of this.
Hey, thank you, Sean.
You bet. Amazing way to end the week with Brent and that exclusive point. Tell all your friends you know something before the curve. By the way, next week, RNC Chairman Mike Watley, Mike Huckabee, Victor Davis Hanson, and Mike Davis. What a week. This is going to be amazing. Again, sign up at SeanSpicer.com to get the newsletter and all the information on the inauguration that you're going to need. Have a great weekend. Go Navy. We'll see you on Monday. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.